So I'll be recording this because I know we're going to have some people that are not going to be able to attend. And so we'll kind of get them and help them out. But I'll make this, the Zoom sessions are not really going to take an hour, so I'll just let you know that. I kind of go over some things that we're discussing and kind of talk about what we're going to talk about this week. Going from there. I'm catching up with everyone's posts because this is one of my largest groups. My last group I only had 14, and I think I'm pushing 30. So bear with me on getting back to responses on posts and everything, but I've been reading everyone's tell me stories and reading up on the ABCs and your learning goals. So I've got a good indication of where we want to go, what the class wants to do, and what we're going to look at and kind of figure out. So how's everyone's summer going so far?
Oh, very good.
Good? Kind of relaxing?
Yes.
After a long year, I get that. Hold on, I'm trying to find my information here.
Uh-oh.
All right. Okay. So, kind of looking over everyone's goals and learning goals and where you want to take this course with this. First off, a couple of things. The digital textbook, don't worry about that. I've made them all the chapters in PDF, so each course has every document for you to read. If you come across something on the course where the link's not working, please let me know right away, because I know when I did those links, I had to do a really extensive work in trying to find the links and make sure the material, but I went through to make sure that everything looks like it's there. But if something's not there, please let me know as soon as possible, and I'll get that taken care of. As you can see, if you're looking for any credit and everything, Casey has put, he sent me an email, so I'll send that message out on how you try to get your Adams State University credit or professional development certificate. I know at the very end of the course, you're going to have to fill out a course evaluation in order to get that. So he'll send out an email just to remind every single one of you how to do that. I'm going from there. I was currently an ELA teacher, English Language Arts, at University High School, but I just accepted an assistant principal job at Heath Middle School here. So I'm in the process of career changing right now. So I don't know if that's going to be something I'm going to be excited about or not, but we're going to find out. But I have been teaching a course at our school in the last several years, which is called Brain Behavior. So I teach that with my students. So a lot of the stuff that I do is based off what we've talked about in the class, and I gear it more toward teachers in education and how things work and how to get our students to be, how do we come as educators and understand the brain schematics of what works and what doesn't work, and how do our children learn. It doesn't matter if you're in elementary or middle or high school. They all have the same mechanics in a way, but just through maturity, especially through middle school, maturity is a little different than it is in high school, and then definitely in elementary. We try to talk a little bit about the disabilities. We look a little bit more of what are some of the things that happen when it comes to the development of the brain. And so this week that you're going to do is, when you look at your coursework this week, it's going to start talking about the idea of the brain plasticity. And what that really means is, my favorite story is, or there's a book in there that you can see that you purchase that I always use, and it's called The Amazing Elastic Brain. And basically what that tells us, and I share that with our students, my students, is it basically allows us to understand that our brain is not what we try to tell the students, it's not a muscle, but it functions like a muscle. And so that's always that little hard thing. And some teachers, when I've taught with, when we start talking about that, is the brain is a muscle. You can exercise it just like any muscle that you do in your body, and it's going to grow and it's going to develop and it's going to build new neurons, and those synapses are going to connect where the learning takes place. We talk about a little bit about stress and how that affects. There's good stress and then there's bad stress. Good stress is where our students are frustrated, they're not really understanding anything, and they're a little challenged about what's going on. Versus stress is home life, not being getting that basic first level of Maslow's hierarchy of the survival needs of food and everything. Someone's getting feedback there. Thank you. So the thing about it is that's what this week's going to talk about, brain plasticity, which basically goes into two things that I really stress out in this course with this next coming week. What I like to talk about in brain plasticity is this idea that you have what we call the growth mindset. We have the fixed and the growth mindset. Any of you have heard of this before?
Yeah.
I have. Yeah.
Okay. What is your experience so far at this idea of the growth and the fixed mindset?
For me, when I hear about growth mindset, I automatically think of Carol Dweck and the work that she's done, and the importance of speaking to your students with growth mindset in mind. So you don't praise how smart someone is, you praise the work, because research has shown that students who believe they are smart don't persist through difficult problems and give up because they feel like, well, if this is hard, then I won't be smart anymore.
Exactly. Anyone else? Okay.
I was going to say that with the fixed mindset or a growth mindset, it's not that you have to be born with it. You can work towards it at any time in your life. That's what I was going to add on. And Valerie did an amazing job explaining that entire thing.
Yes, she did. Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? The growth mindset is an interesting one, and Carol Dweck has wonderful literature that she's written about. I know she just wrote in a recent article talking about that there's been misunderstanding sometimes when it comes to the growth mindset, and people are like thinking, and like you talked about this idea, you're not born with it. And this idea about when we test our students with intelligence, we look at the IQ test, or we're trying to do, those are small snapshots, but it doesn't mean that a student can't take the learning material or what we're trying to teach them and build upon it and grow. My favorite story is I always talk about Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein married his other half. Albert Einstein was mathematically and scientifically knowledgeable in the brain part, but he didn't have the skills for reading and writing. He was very poor on that. And so when we look at two rubber bands, one's larger than the other, and that's how I use this idea about the rubber bands, is that his mathematical and scientifical rubber band was already large. However, his reading and writing was a smaller rubber band. And so what he did is he married his wife, and then with his wife, he was able to find out she was the one that wrote all his reports. She was the one that wrote all his reports and did all that fun stuff and everything. And so she was the other half. She didn't have the mathematical science, so her reading and writing rubber band was this large versus her math and science was this large. So that was the kind of the situation to tell that story. But we can tell our students, when you're looking at the brain plasticity and the growth mindset, you can tell I tell the students, when you're learning new things like a new language, or you're learning math, or you're learning reading and writing, You're stretching those rubber bands, and the only way that works with this brain, the brain plasticity, is that you have to practice at it, and that's the only way it stretches those areas, whether it be in the parietal lobes or the frontal lobes or the prefrontal cortex. It builds and it stretches those out to that's where they learn. And that's where our students struggle with in the classroom, is when they're looking at especially that growth mindset. If they don't do it right the first time, their instantaneous reaction is, I'm not smart. I can't do math. I'm never going to be able to do this correctly. However, it's based on what Valerie said. It's really how you praise them. And, you don't come and tell a student, oh, you're very smart at this, because once you use that word terminology, then they've already got this fixed mindset that they're only smart at this level. And they're not, then they have that expectation that they have to be this smart. However, when we tell them like, oh, look at the effort you put behind this, you did really well with this, this is really good. Next time, you keep the effort going, or where did you make a mistake that you need to correct? And going from there. So how many of you have ever had that experience where you have those students, and a lot of it comes from the home-based well too, which means parents are the ones during parent-teacher conferences are my favorite, because that's what they're like, well, aren't you smart? Can't you do math? Isn't it, that intelligent? How many of you have ever experienced that?
I've experienced parents expressing their own frustration with certain areas. Well, I wasn't very good at, and so I'm not expecting my child to be good at. Instead of, looking for, well, where are some areas that I can make sure I can help my student, versus, well, it's just, I'm not going to get it. They didn't get it, so.
Yeah, that's exactly there. I'm taking notes what you guys are saying. Sorry. So it looks like I'm doing something else. Anyone else?
I think sometimes I've had students and their math, their parents in conference, and it's about math, and the parents will say, well, I wasn't good at math, so they're not good at math. Like it's a genetic thing or something like that. And instead of seeing that their student can improve, they can get better at math, and also the parent can as well. I think the thing with fixed mindset is mistakes are looked down upon. You're not supposed to make mistakes. And the growth mindset, you need to embrace those, because that's how you improve, that your brain stretches and grows more when you make a mistake, even though you're not even aware of the mistake that you've made necessarily, or found your mistake. Some of the work by Joe Bowler, mathematical mindsets and things like that.
And it is an interesting story. I have a poster. Actually, I created a banner when I started working with the brain and started teaching classes on it. And I have a banner that says mistakes. It says we expect them, we appreciate them, and we'll deal with them. And ever since I have that, when a student makes a mistake, and whether it was a spelling test, or a vocabulary list, or it was some type of writing that they said, well, I did this, I really put my effort behind in this writing, and I can't believe that this is the score. I pull around and I say, but look at the great stuff that you already did. Look at the stuff that you were successful on. And these are just the areas that we really need to work on. So what kind of a plan are you going to create to build upon this, so that way we can work on this and make this happen? And again, it's really about the approach on the brain plasticity that you're going to work with this. And in this coming week's lesson, you're going to find out when you read the textbook, and there's a couple of other articles that I posted up there to talking about this growth mindset and dealing with this idea of the brain plasticity, is, the only way we can get our students to understand it is based on how we praise our students, or how we approach the students to look at their work, where they made their mistakes, how can they build on their mistakes, or how can they change them, and what kind of plan of action can you build on that. Another thing that we're going to talk about this coming week when we're looking at the brain plasticity is we're going to dive into more about the brain. You're going to look at the idea of, first off, all our students is, when you look at your amygdala, it's about the size of your pinky. I always tell them that, the amygdala. Anyone know what the amygdala does? So there's like a little question there, what the amygdala does.
It's the emotions controller.
It's
like the crazy man who tells you how to react.
And the funny thing is like when I tell the students, when we look at our brain, when you look at your brain, the amygdala is right dead smack in the middle of our brain. And that's what it's our emotional control sense. It's what controls our emotions. It's what makes us happy, sad, angry, stressed, everything. But the prefrontal cortex, which is right here in the front part of our brain, that's where the logical thinking is. That's where our rationale, that's where we have to critically think. And unfortunately, our children, our students are not fully developed in that area just yet. Research will tell you that females will mature around the prefrontal cortex more around the age of between 20 and 21, whereas the males, it's more around 24, 25 when they start maturity. That's if they have a healthy brain. There's no learning disabilities. There's been no severe drug use or anything like that, or anything environmental or self-induced toxins that are going to cause to create the change of it. So when our students are trying to rationale things, you know, they're going to use the emotional more. That's where that growth mindset, that's where those praises are coming out. How do I praise a child correctly to make sure that I'm not fixing them on the same way? You're smart, you're intelligent. Why can't you be like your brother or sister who are smart and intelligent? Versus on, you know, you're putting a lot of effort behind this. You're really trying to grow here, and I really like what you did here. And, you know, and I know we're struggling here, but, you know, how are we going to work this together? So the amygdala is that it's the emotional control part, which is really hard for a lot of people to understand, especially our students, because that's what they come in. And that's our battle, is we have to fight the emotions first before we can logically get them, especially if they fail the test. You know, that's where they're going to come out and say, well, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I don't know anything, I'm not smart. So we got to really work on that. And so this week when we're looking at the work and the reading is that the idea of understanding is, how do I approach the growth mindset in my classroom? And your challenge this week is going to be thinking about that. You know, how would I approach this? What is something that I've reflected on with one of my students, or what was something that I can try to push that next year when I do a lesson plan? How can I do this? I did put on there a website that you guys and gals can look at that gives you a great start of how to develop that growth mindset at the very beginning of the school year. Which was a struggle for my last course, because we were right in the middle of the, you know, toward the end of the year. But now that you guys and gals are in the summer course, you have this opportunity to take that lesson and build upon it and say, how can I do this? And I'm also going to put a link to another book that two teachers, I can't think of their names right now, they wrote a book where every month they have a growth mindset for the brain idea. The month of August. This is activities that we're going to do for the month of August that build and scaffold to when we get to September. Here's our theme for the brain schematics of the brain plasticity to grow and build. Here's what we're going to do at September. Here's what we're going to do in October. So I'll put the link on there for you, whether you have a Kindle or if you want to get it hardback. It's really cheap. It's like, I think, less than $15 on hardback, and I think on Kindle it was like $9. But it's a really good resource, and it's kind of like a coaching book that they work on and they build on that part. But this idea, again, is we've got to really understand that when it comes to the brain, it's such a part of my word, I get this always great. It's such a sophisticated organ in our bodies, and it's the main central hub where all of the learning takes place. Everything that we do happens inside the brain. And that's the interesting part about this entire course that we're going to dive into, is looking at the various things. And like I said, we're going to start with this idea of the brain plasticity, and your PDF, which will be the textbook chapters on that, will give you more information about this idea of looking and understanding and kind of diving into, like, what is this idea about this elastic brain? There's a chart in there that's going to show you where the learning takes place and where the crucial learning is. Crucial learning starts at the age around 5, and then it changes around the age of 10. And then from 10 to about the age of 20, there's a whole different thing. But that middle school, elementary, intermediate elementary to middle school area, that year of 10, that's where that learning takes place. And that's why when you think of elementary teachers, they're teaching all those subjects: math, science, social studies, reading and writing, because that's where the majority of this large learning is happening. And so that's what you're going to dive into this week, and looking at that. And kind of going in and understanding what this brain plasticity is really all about. I mean, I can sit here and talk about it forever and, dive into that, but I want you guys and gals to kind of read the material, look up some information. There's, like I said, there's some other PDFs in there that you can resource and look at and kind of understand what's going on and how you can apply this to the classroom. I think, if I'm correct, the homework assignment is going to be a reflection paper, which is, I don't think there's a discussion post. I'll have to look again. But it's going to be a reflection paper that's basically going to talk about your experience with the growth mindset and fixed mindset, how can you change this? How can you apply it into your teaching? And when you're creating text, creating lessons, what can you do with that? So the idea behind that will be really good when you're looking at it this week and going from there. I do have one question because, like I said, I try to keep these around 30 minutes. I hope that's okay with you guys because, like I said, I don't want to take an hour. But I could try to keep them at 30 minutes, and so we got about 20 minutes. Many of you had great responses about your ABCs. Pick one of those ABCs and tell us why that one was your favorite, or what was the shocking moment that you had with that. Everyone's opening their files now.
I'll go.
Okay.
Am I can you, I don't know how to use Zoom, so can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So I liked the genetics piece. I always think that I like the part about it where the genetics is just one portion of who our kids are and what they come to us with. And the genetic portion is not the driving force, but there are so many other factors that can affect how our kids learn, and that just because they might have a genetic condition or maybe they really are good at math, doesn't mean that they can't be good at other things too. That it's what we bring to them.
And I love that you bring up that point, Teresa, because that's one thing that's really interesting is that you're going to find about this. And if you were to get that book, it doesn't matter what grade level you teach at or what content you teach on. I really do encourage you to get that book that's called The Great Elastic Brain. It's by Dr. Jonah Dyke, I think her name is. And I purchased that. And they also have where you can put it on the iPad, and it's got like the digital version. But what it does, it does exactly what Teresa says. It talks about this is I always buy a variety of rubber bands. Oh, there it is. She's holding it up. There it is. The Fantastic Elastic Brain. Great book. Great book. I always buy a plastic, like a little sandwich bag, and I put a variety of rubber bands, large ones, small ones, different colors and everything. And when I approach a lesson in the classroom at the very beginning of the year to talking to my students, I turn on the inside, I bring out this bag and I try to shape it as a brain, and I say, this is your brain. You were given this. You didn't get to select that I want to be intelligent in reading, or I want to be intelligent in science, or I want to be intelligent in underwater basket weaving. This is what you're given. And your genetics are these different styles of rubber bands. They're the different types. They're the different lengths. And you're going to have some that are going to be, like I said, very large in scale, which is, okay, I have a family that my genes, we're really good at math. So math is going to become really simple and easy when I go to the classroom or when I'm doing a lesson. The math I can be able to understand really easy because, well, it's part of my genes. But reading is really hard for me. Reading, I struggle. Well, that's where you're going to have that one rubber band, and that's why I talk to them, is you're going to have that rubber band, and that's where you're going to need to stretch it every day. You're going to have to work it out like a muscle. I say, how many of you like to go to the gym and work out? And they're like, half of the boys and raise their hand. I said, okay. I said, when you go and work out one day, I said, does your muscle get large? They're like, no, it's sore. I said, okay, the sore is that stretching of the rubber band when you're coming to your learning. I said, but after 6 weeks, you're going to start noticing some different definition in your muscle. Your arm's going to look a little bit bigger. You're going to start having a little tighter muscle. I said, that's how your brain works when you're looking at this brain plasticity, when you're stretching it. Your reading skills are going to build, but the only way that happens is you have to practice, you have to practice, and you have to practice. Who else wants to share something about one of their ABCs? Thank you, Teresa.
I don't know how to do it. Can you guys hear me?
We can see you and hear you.
Okay, this is the first time ever doing this, so I'm not quite sure if I'm doing it right. But I picked The Joy of Learning.
Okay.
And one thing that I really liked about that paragraph was when they talked about like the intrinsic motivation factor that is so important with learning. And I actually do reading intervention for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And a lot of my kiddos, talking about the fixed mindset, a lot of them come and they automatically see themselves as bad readers and I'm not good at this. So a lot of what I try to do is kind of instill that excitement and get them to be motivated to pick up a book that they may not have been interested in and show them ways to get motivated to read new things. And based on, kind of getting into those different books and reading, they develop that motivation to keep reading and to, keep trying and keep practicing and all that good stuff. So I really liked that, that one, the Joy of Learning.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I just add on to that real quick?
Go for it, Deanna.
So I picked Joy of Learning also, and so I figured that would be a good chance for me to just kind of add on to what Amy said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought Joy of Learning was great. Just I think it goes along with that growth mindset, because I think that once you start seeing change, that's kind of an emotional thing, especially for something like math. I think there's a few math teachers that can kind of relate with that. For a lot of kids who have negative emotions about math, being able to see growth and see change when they put in the effort, I think leads to that joy of learning. So that was one that struck me.
Nice. Anyone else want to share?
I look for, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Brett.
I look for emotions. When I teach complicated subjects such as physics, a lot of math teachers also, I always have this belief that you have to look at the whole student and not just give the whole entire content of the issue. I've really practiced with a psychology teacher at my last school about building a fear-free classroom with love and logic. And that's been transformational for me through the years.
Nice. And it is. And I love how you said it's the whole student. It's just not a portion, it's the whole student.
I'll go ahead. I work at a middle school as a social worker. I chose I think it was teamwork and socialization, just because once these kiddos get to middle school, their focus on adults kind of shifts to being accepted by peers, and really navigating how to relate to peers. And that creates a lot of learning opportunities that aren't always so messy learning opportunities, but that is a lot of learning that happens in middle school, is learning with your peers how to relate to peers. So that the socialization and teamwork one has really resonated with me from my domain.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to go?
I picked intelligence, and I guess the discussion that intelligence is not just static, it just doesn't stay the same, that it's dependent upon experience. It's not just based on genetics, that you can actually grow your brain, that you can develop it, the learning can take place at any age and any stage of life. And I think that's important for kids to know that they have that potential to learn and grow and develop and become smarter, that it's just not something that you're born with or you're not.
And that's the hard part, especially when you try for students. And like I said, even when I start teaching the class and we're talking about this, I throw out these questions and where's your knowledge come from? And you'll find out that a lot of students will be on this idea, the fixed mindset is like, well, my dad's great at engineering, so I need to be great at engineering, or here. And then as they get older, they're like, well, I'm not like really good at what my dad does, but I should be because, I'm a child of my dad. And that's what we talk about going, again, your genetics you're taking in genetics, not only from your mom and dad, but from your grandparents and your great-grandparents. And I said, it just builds up. I said, and so you're being given these genetics that you're going to have to figure out, and you're going to have to learn which ones I need to build upon to which ones I've already built. I said, because you can't work the same muscle over and over and expect the same gains, because sooner or later it's not going to gain anything. I said, so if I'm good at math and I just keep doing that, great, but I need to build these other skills. And that's where we really want to stretch that brain to develop and create this idea that I can take on any task. And really, but the best thing they'll tell you is musical instruments, new languages are one of the two top that I've read and researched that are where they really do shape the brain greatly with students. if you challenge to learn a new English. We can do the same thing as adults. I always tell them, we can take on, I taught myself the ukulele last summer. I found out it only takes 20. You have to do, it was a challenge, let me tell you. I'm proficient in it. I'm not advanced yet. But if I dedicated 20 hours for 1 week, I became competent in it, which means, in the morning I practiced 2 hours, in the evening I practiced 2 hours. And by the end of the week, I was competent that I knew the chords and everything. That stretched my brain. Was I tired at the end of the day? Yes, because I was developing that portion of the brain that didn't know how to do it. But for us adults, it's going to take a little longer for us to learn, a lot more practice for us to learn than our students who are at that developmental age, to where it's going to be picked up easier for them as well.
And I think students forget that it takes hard work to be good at something. They look at some of their peers who are great basketball players, or some of the pros that make it look so easy. And it's like, well, yeah, they might have had some talent, but a lot of them were, they started very poorly, but they don't see all of the hours of hard work and all of the failures one after another. They just think it should just be easy, that road. You're either good at, and if it's difficult, or if there's a roadblock, they don't want to persevere and work through it because they just won't be good at it. That's, they kind of equate the two, I think.
That's why I love Peyton Manning's commercial with the hospital, where he talks about the hours, and Maxwell Gladwell, the gentleman who wrote the book, The Outliers, he tells you it's 200, it's 20,000 hours. I mean, or more than that. That's what it's going to take to become at that expert level. And I always show a video with Michael Phelps, because I'm a big Michael Phelps fan. I always show the video, and he talks about that. What is his routine? He says, people will still be sleeping at 4 a.m. But I'm at the pool working out at 4 a.m. It's my routine. I do it every day. I build on it. And that's when I put in the hours and dedication. That's why I become the great person that I am. Anyone else with their ABCs?
I think kids too are just used to instant gratification. So they want that, just like, I just want to instantly be good. And so, yeah. I was going to say, I know the class is called Brain and Learning, but I was interested in what it said about the brain, in that it said its main function is communication. And I just want to know more about that, and how, like, nowadays the communication is totally different. Like, some kids might not even talk that much because they're just writing it, barely writing it. So that was really interesting to me. I don't know if I was just supposed to know that, but.
No, communication, that's a big thing there, because as you know now, and there's a lot of research, these have changed how our students function. They've changed the way how they approach their learning. It's changed the way how they approach and perceive the world and see things. And there's a lot of new science coming out, and I got a couple of articles that I just recently received through my email that are based on this idea of how the smartphones are helping but also hindering our students. And it's based on our learning. Our students are engaged on that. I mean, when I'm in the classroom, the students are, I'll find them, I'm like, what are you doing? And my student's like, well, can I type my essay here? And I'm like, it's great. You can type your essay, but I also want you to handwrite it. I said, because I still want you to build your motor skills. I still want you to be able to understand how to physically write a letter or write an essay versus just typing it up. I said, because you're using 2 different systems of your brains when you're communicating that. That's that part. So you're pointing out a good point that, yes, it's brain and learning. So like I said, in this course, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to, be everywhere, but we're going to try to not get too much, because we are talking about this one organ that is truly sophisticated, and every day they're developing more and more understanding of how it functions, it works. Anyone else? I know the time says 6:33, and so anyone else want to share an ABC?
I chose the plasticity. I chose it because it's hard to pronounce. Plasticity, because I'm working with those senior adults as well, and it's interesting working with the two kind of extremes. So I do elementary during the school year, and I work with the seniors in the summers. The idea of the use it or lose it sort of mentality, and just letting them know that they are flexing a muscle and flexing their brains, and it's not always easy. I think that's where that cognitive dissonance comes in. Yep. If you keep it just intense enough, it will encourage them to continue. without feeling stupid, which I find I get from both sets of kids. Is if they don't get it right away, some of them immediately jump to a judgment that they can't do it, or they're stupid, or they're not not one of their strengths. And oftentimes with the young kids, I'll talk about, you know, how long did it take to throw a perfect spiral for some of them,
Mm-hmm.
and then it starts to make sense to them when you use it for particularly some sort of physical practice, but a mental practice, they don't seem to make that connection that's part of flexing the brain, flexing the muscle.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up a good point there, Curtis, and idea. And I love how you talked about this idea about, you know, relaying the sports idea to the development and everything. You know, that's what's interesting about when you talk to students about whether they're in sports or they're trying to get it fit and everything. They see the results. They see the results. But what they don't see is the results in the brain when it comes to learning. And when you're trying to learn something new, they have that indication. They try to figure out that. I always tell them and say, we used to do these brain projects in our classroom where I always give them this problem. I talk a little bit about them, and I'm going to say, all right, develop a solution. And they just look at me like, okay, but you're not going to guide us. I'm like, no, here's what I want you to do. There are 4 brains at this table. And we did an intelligence test. You know, we did this multiple intelligence test. I said, one of you is a kinesthetic, one of you is the logical. I said, you've got all these strengths right here. Now you've got this issue. Approach a problem, and how are you going to solve it? And I lead to the creativity part on that. And they struggle with that because what they start looking at is they're trying to find that one solution. And they're going to say, well, this is how you approach it, and there should be that one. And I always tell them, there's not going to be one set solution that's going to say that this is the one and only solution you can use. You can find different ways. And at the very end of that unit, you come to find out when they start presenting it on their PowerPoints or their charts and everything, it's amazing how you see these students approach this problem and the variety of solutions that students brought up. And they're like, wow, I never thought I could approach it that way. I never thought. And it's like, but you solve the problem. That's what we're looking at. I said, that's what our brains do. As we build and we build on that plasticity of it and we stretch it, we're learning new modes of how we can function. And when we actually understand that mode, like you said, it finally takes a while to learn how to do the spiral. You figure it out. Now it just comes to you naturally. You don't have to put effort behind it because it's already programmed, and that muscle in the brain or that section of the brain has already been programmed to become now second nature. And that's, like you said, a lot of students will shut down when you challenge them to that one level. You challenge them, they get frustrated. I'm still working on crossword puzzles. I have been trying to do those for years. My mom was great at those. I get frustrated. But that's where it is. And it's when you start seeing how those function and build, that's what we got to get our students to know is how do I approach that, whether it's looking over a graded assignment, whether it's preparing a pre-assessment, whether it's creating my lesson plans. Because I've reviewed a lot of lesson plans with a lot of my colleagues, and I always tell them right there, I'm going, you're giving them a fixed mindset lesson plan. You're giving them that lesson plan to where there's no growth mindset to it. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And so I point out, like, okay, look at your objectives. Now look at the plan. Look at the unit, the step-by-step procedures you're giving them. I said, that's very fixed mindset. There's either right or wrong. How can you change it to where it's more of a growth mindset to say, where is that creativity learning can come from, which is part of the brain plasticity? How can I be creative in the way to do that? And that's what all these, when our students graduate high school, you know, going through all their school education, that's what these business people, the business world is looking and saying, how can you collaboratively work with people and be creative and find different innovative solutions versus one set solution? So good job, Curtis. I appreciate that. And if I didn't tell anyone else who talked and I didn't say thank you, I sorry. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
You really have. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
But switching to consumer cellular, easy.
Oh, there's a TV. Well, if there's not any other questions or anyone else that wants to share their one of their ABCs, again, our next Zoom session will be on July 9th. They are recorded, so if you don't get a chance to be online with it, it will be uploaded the next day after the Zoom session, so that way you can preview it and review it and go from there. Like I said, we kind of talk about it. I really try to use these Zoom sessions just to have more of a discussion and dialogue about what we've read, any questions that people have brought up. I know there's times that you've probably taken other courses where they break out in breakout rooms and everything. I'm barely learning how to do this with this whole Zoom, so bear with me. But down the road is we only have one more Zoom session, which is going to be on July 9th. But everything else will be online. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to email me. I know I got back to you, Amy, everything. So like I said, give me about 24 hours to get back to you with questions or concerns that you have. Brad, did you get the email from? Okay, want to make sure. So the thing about it is any questions or concerns, let me know. I will have all your grades posted up by the middle of this week. I'm going to be on the road. I'm taking this adventure. Don't ask me why. So if you religious, please pray for me. I'm leaving Tuesday and I'm driving to Calgary, Canada.
Wow.
And then I'm going from Calgary. I'm going to spend a few days with my friend there. And then we're driving the Canada Trans all the way to Ontario, which is a 3-day drive. And then staying in Ontario for a day. And then I'm driving straight back to be here back because I've got a conference to be back at July 9th. And so that's going to be stressful.
Wow.
But it's an adventure. I love it. It's stretching the brain and trying to do it from there. So, but I will be checking my email, so I'll have internet access if there's any questions. And like I said, and I'll have your grades posted up by the middle of this week and going from there. If there are any questions. If not, thank you again for being here this evening. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for signing up for this course. And like I said, I'm going to do my very best to provide you with your learning goals. I've read over them and I'm looking over them and I'm keeping an agenda of what I really want to talk about. I don't want to waste your time with things that you're not interested in. I want to make sure that we tap into the interests that you posted on there that you're all about. And that's why, like I said, asked you for your top 3 learning goals of what you want to cover in this course. All right. Well, with that said, have a great week and take care. And I will see you on July 9th on the Zoom.
Okay.
You.
Everybody.
Bye. Have a good trip. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I don't know how to get out of here.
Touch your screen. And in the top, they'll say leave meeting.
Touch the screen.
You,
Oh, I see it. Okay. Bye.
Bye.